Humans first appeared 2.5 million years ago after they evolved from an earlier genus of Australopithecus apes. At this point, they did not stand out from other organisms. There were predators bigger and more powerful that were on top of the food chain. Although humans discovered fire around 800,000 years ago, they only began using it on a daily basis around 300,000 years ago. Fire killed the germs and parasites which infested food, made chewing food easier, which in return made eating a less time-consuming activity. Fire also allowed humans to warm themselves during cold nights and even scare away lions. It is the domestication of fire that allowed man to finally rise to the top of the food chain around 100,000 years ago. But let's talk a little about the science. Homo sapiens. Homo is the genus and sapiens is the species. Species that evolved from a common ancestor are bunched together under the heading genus. For example, the lion, tiger, panther, and cheetah are all different species under the genus Panthera. In other words, they're all siblings under the genus family Panthera. In that case, how many species do you think there are under the genus Homo? Do we or have we ever had any siblings? The answer is yes. We did have a variety of siblings at a certain point in time, ranging from Homo erectus of East Asia to the Denisova hominins of Siberia that were recently discovered. All coexisted in different places around the world, thereby implying a non-linear model of evolution, and chances are that more species are going to be discovered in the future. For the last 10,000 years, only Homo sapiens have roamed this planet, but just before that, even as little as 20,000 years ago, we shared this planet with our siblings. This begs one critical question: what happened to the other species of humans? The interbreeding theory states that, as the African immigrants spread around the world, they bred with other human populations, and people today are the outcome of this interbreeding. The replacement theory, which is the one that's most commonly accepted to be true, states that sapiens and other humans had different anatomies, different mating habits, and had little sexual interest in each other. Therefore, sapiens replaced all the previous human populations without merging with them. If that's the case, the lineages of all contemporary humans can be traced back, exclusively, to East Africa 70,000 years ago. We are all pure sapiens. And if they didn't merge, what happened to these other species? Well, the first possibility is that Homo sapiens drove them to extinction with their proficiency in hunting and gathering, leaving little behind for the species that already existed in these areas. In other words, these species slowly died out. The second possibility is that competition for resources led to violence and genocide, or in other words, an ethnic cleansing. But the reason we rule today, according to Harari, and not animals of course, is because we have the ability to cooperate flexibly in large numbers. Once Homo sapiens were the only species of human left, we were able to comprehensively develop as complex animals. In evolutionary psychology, there are multiple paradigms that would explain why we are the way we are, primarily in the ways we communicate and cohabitate. In regards to how we communicate, our language is one of the ultimate elements that separates us from other species. While many have advanced ways of communicating, our social abilities have extended our language beyond communicating warnings such as, "There is a lion down by the river." While such warnings are super important to survival, they are limited. Instead, Harari claims that gossip and storytelling were part of a feedback loop that led to our propulsion into advanced thinking. So, as important as communicating, "There is a lion by the river" is, it is even more important to communicate about our fellow humans. So, we have the beginning of lying and gossip, which is absolutely essential to evolution. And language developed as a result of the need to gossip, and the need to gossip was only supported by the language that then came to be. The transition to agriculture began around 10,000 years ago in southeastern Turkey, Iran, and the Levant. The transition was quite slow and was evidently confined to a specific geographic area. Scholars originally believed that agriculture spread from a single point in the Middle East to all four corners of the world, but agriculture actually sprang up in other parts of the world independently. This begs questions such as why farmers in Central America were growing maize without any external influence, whilst Aboriginal Australians experienced no agricultural revolution whatsoever. The answer is simple. Most animals and plants cannot be domesticated. The few species that were able to be domesticated lived in particular places, and those particular places were where agricultural evolutions occurred. It is safe to say that we all followed the diet of an ancient farmer. About 90% of the foods we consume consist of base ingredients that were uncovered during the agricultural revolution, such as wheat, rice, potatoes, and maize. Nonetheless, dominant scholarship likes to make us believe that the agricultural revolution was revolutionary and positive in all aspects. The commonly held view is that grain was the gateway towards culture and advancement, and we more or less evolved the grain to suit our needs. Here's the paradox. We didn't domesticate grain. Grain domesticated us. This is a quite difficult concept to wrap your head around, so let's think it through. Who was it that had to clear the fields? Who was it that had to guard the fields to make sure wild animals didn't destroy the crops? Who had to lug heavy buckets of water for hours to nourish the grain? More importantly, who was forced to adopt a sedentary lifestyle in an effort to be closer to the grain being grown? The very word domesticate stems from the Latin phrase domus, which means house. Who's living in the house? Not grain, it's the sapiens. To be fair, grain did allow the total sum of food to go up. But what were the repercussions? First of all, more famine, because now people are relying on a very small amount of plant species for most of their calorie intake. So if there isn't enough rain or some fungus infects the fields, people begin starving and dying by the thousands. Less minerals and vitamins is quite obvious, because grain is usually just empty calories and is quite hard to digest. Hernias and slip discs come from spending hours and hours in the fields. This is perhaps the most unnatural aspect of the agricultural revolution. Human beings did not evolve to do this sort of work, and their bodies paid the price. We can run and climb trees, sure, we evolved to do those things, but not spend hours bent over picking at weeds. More war. This is an interesting one, because if you think critically, peasants couldn't see an invader and just flee like a hunter-gatherer would. They have something to lose now, their sustenance. So, they have to face their invaders, even if they're ill-prepared to do so. Spread of disease is quite obvious. More and more people are concentrated in one area, thereby leading to the spread of measles, smallpox, etc. Less free time is perhaps the most sad repercussion, considering human beings are social animals. This is actually something that hunter-gatherers have tons of, thereby giving more leeway towards developing rich oral cultures or just having fun and living life. But if everything was so bad, why didn't sapiens just abandon grain and stop farming? Well, the transition took so long that by the time it was completed, people forgot about the hunter-gatherer days. Furthermore, the population was so large at that point that they had no way of coming back. After all, tons of people would have to voluntarily die for sapiens to return to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle that can only really support small bands. In other words, sapiens became stuck in a luxury trap. An invention, in this case grain, which was supposed to make life easier, made life harder, and there was no way to go back. The same can be said for our own modern-day society. Think of email or smartphones. It used to be that you'd have weeks to respond to a letter and think of a clever response. Now, we must email back within 24 hours or risk offending the original sender. We are always wired and check our phones impulsively throughout the day. Face-to-face communication is rapidly decreasing, and it seems there is never any escape. Think of urban, college-educated, white-collar life. People go into a bunch of debt that they're never able to pay off, just to settle for a 9-to-5 job that does not pay enough. They don't have time to spend with their family or friends, and this is, of course, all done for the promise of an easier life. In the quest for improvement, human beings seem to be stuck in a disastrous cycle where life is becoming harder. And sure, we no longer walk around with spears and minimal clothing trying to hunt down wild animals, but we are still struggling to survive in our own way, and in a way that most hunter-gatherer societies did not have to. And the legacy behind grain, or the agricultural revolution as a whole, is just that, struggling to survive. It's quite pessimistic, but that's what Harari wanted to leave us with. So, we know that the cognitive and agricultural revolutions allowed us to dominate the world, but how exactly did we get to where we are today? How do we live lives where we can cooperate flexibly in large numbers? Harari says the answer lies in mankind's ability to imagine. After the agricultural revolution, human societies grew more complex, and imagined constructs became their bread and butter. The myths and fictions that accustom people, nearly from birth, to behave and think in certain ways, created artificial instincts that enabled millions of strangers to cooperate effectively. This network of artificial instincts is called culture. Every culture has its own beliefs, norms, and values. They exist only in our collective imagination, yet their power is immense. As long as everyone believes the same stories and follows the same rules, this large-scale cooperation continues. In the animal kingdom, communication systems are used solely to describe objective reality. For example, a chimpanzee would think, "This is a banana, I can eat it." But humans can look up at the clouds and say, as well as wholly believe, that there's a God who created us, so let's pray to him. Harari wanted to emphasize that this mechanism is present in all instances of mass human cooperation. Let's look at money as an example. Harari believes that money is the most universal and efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. It can bridge any cultural gap and it doesn't discriminate. Money is the most successful story ever invented and told by humans, because interestingly enough, it is the only indisputable story in existence. Not everybody believes in God, never mind the same God. Not everybody believes in democracy or human rights, but everybody believes in money. In conclusion, humans are able to control the world because they operate in a dual reality. We live in a world that consists of objective things like oceans, trees, and mountains, but we also live in a fictional world made of nations, religion, and money. When this fictional world becomes the dominant reality, humankind rises to power through unification. And such unification is exactly what will drive humans of the future in their quest to populate other planets, endure extreme apocalyptic climates, and survive interstellar travel. Harari predicts that the humans of this future will not be Homo sapiens, but rather another, more superior species under the genus Homo, all thanks to the power of imagination.